Hello, I'm Lowell, pronouns he, him, and welcome to another episode of the Open Hearth podcast. So, this is a show that draws on the experience and play of the Open Hearth Gaming Community. We are an online TTRPG gaming group, and we play a lot of different kinds of games and gaming, story games, OSR. There's some people doing solo, parallel play, and a whole bunch of other things. We have a mandatory use of safety tools for all play in the community, and all of that is supported by a special calendar app, and we have a Discord, and of course, we have a Patreon, which supports all of these podcasts and things. So I say it at the top of the hour. And then I'll say it again at the end. That's one of the ways you can help us out if you're enjoying any of the podcasts that we do. As usual, we have brought on a pair of community members to talk about their recent gaming. And with me is Michael D. and Alan. Anything you wanted to say by way of introduction, Michael?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm Michael. You can also find me as K-pop in RPGs. I use he, him, or they, them pronouns.
Excellent. And K-pop and RPGs long before K-pop Demon Hunters. So just there,
Yeah.
everybody should know. And Alan?
Alan Reese. My pronouns are he, him. You can find my gaming endeavors under the title Gallus Games on Itch or Drive-Thru. And I've been part of this community now since, I think, 2019. Time is marching on.
Yeah. For our first segment, we have everyone tell us about how their recent games have gone, and then talk with us a little more about something that they've played or watched. So, Michael, tell us about your recent gaming.
So I prepared a list because there's been quite some games happening since the Shared Hearth gaming event at the beginning of October. So within the community, I've played Yeseba's Bed and Breakfast with either Clarice as a facilitator or Casey, and that's always dynamite. I really enjoy hanging out with those guys and whoever joins us. And I was also in a one shot of Teeth, Blood Clotillion, run by Tiamat, and she was really, really kind because I mentioned somewhere that I've heard about this game and maybe I wanted to try it out. And she said, okay, I'm gonna put it on the calendar for you.
Nice.
So it was amazing. Outside of the community, I played Revolt, May of Fish in Interesting Times, Inevitable, and Daggerheart. And the last one is with my home group. That's a game I wouldn't necessarily pick up, but our GM is really into the game. And so I said, okay, I'll go along. And so far, it's not bad. Besides
You are
that,
damning that with faint praise.
I mean, yeah, so the fights are taking a bit.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I'm going to say.
Okay.
I ran or facilitated one-shots of Token, Diatonic, Yeseba's Bed and Breakfast, and I'm currently also in the middle of running a short campaign of Trophy Gold. And in addition to that, I facilitated 2 one-shots of Going for Broke, and that's actually the game I want to talk about.
So I have never heard of this. So tell us what this is.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Going for Broke is, I'm just going to quote the pitch from the PDF. Going for Broke is a fast-paced sitcom role-playing game about a collective house scrambling to get enough money together. So it's quite focused, it's quite simple, and that's the latest game by Avery Alder, a name you might be familiar with if you've played Monster Hearts, The Quiet Year, or Dream's Queue. And I had so much fun playing this the last weekend. I was on a small retreat with some friends and we played many games. That's why my list is so long, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it worked like a charm. I've played with people I've known for many years and some strangers, and everyone was able to grasp what the game is about pretty quickly. So I think I'll just walk you through
Mm-hmm.
what the game is about because it's so simple. I think within 5 minutes I can summarize all the rules. I'll try to focus on the important stuff just so you won't get too distracted by the I'm tempted to say mechanics, but there's just a single mechanic, but I'll get to that in a second. So the setup is super quick. You've got like 12 pre-gens, all who are supposed to be roommates, and each character is basically finished. You don't have to customize it in any way. Each player picks one. Afterwards, you, as a group, choose one of 6 premises for the episode, for the game you're playing. And for example, there's a plumbing issue that floods the basement of your house, and now you have to fix it. Or your van breaks down during a trip, and you have to find a way to continue. And after that, you basically dive in. So you've got an opening scene where you play out an argument, how to cover that a huge expense, like fixing the van or fixing your plumbing issue. And after that, it spirals into 2 ill-conceived plots. Those are called the A plot and the B plot of the episode. So, for example, when we played, we picked the premise The Rent, and that's basically about an NPC roommate who bailed 3 days before the rent is due. In our case, 3 players decided to track her down, and the other 3 players decided to find a replacement who could cover the costs. After that, you've got like a quick montage that introduces each character, and then you play out a couple of short scenes that alternate between the 2 plots. Ultimately, one plot succeeds, the other one fails, and the characters are right back where they started, with them barely getting by. So, how do you determine which plot succeeds? It's basically just a coin flip.
Hmm.
And that's the beauty of it. It's so simple, it's so elegant. If the A plot succeeds, the B plot automatically is doomed. And now you might be curious, how do you do that actually? And that's linked to the characters. They are really, really simple. So I'm gonna walk you through an example. They've got a picture, a name, and a short description, character traits, and a classic question. That's basically what the character is about. For example, I played Parisa, a part-time waitress, full-time Scorpio. And the text says, you tend to remember every little preference or criterion that people tell you and suddenly lose interest. Your big secret is you're planning to pack up and leave the country next week. And the classic question is, are you a loyal friend or a bitter foe? So when you answer that question in a scene, you get to unlock a coin. For example, when I played Parisa in one scene, my character was nice for once and supported another roommate emotionally, even though that meant Parisa would have been worse off eventually. And then I said, well, that scene just illustrated that in today's episode, I'm a loyal friend. So I took a coin. And the next time I'm in a scene, I get to flip that coin. On a heads, my plot succeeds, and I get to narrate how that looks. And on a tails, there's a plot twist, which is narrated by another character, or rather player.
Can I ask a question? Because I found this fascinating. So in your scene, you're a loyal friend, you get a coin. In your next scene, suppose you're in plot A and you're tracking down, yeah?
Yeah.
You flip your coin on a head, you're going to find the missing roommate. On a tail, there's going to be a complication introduced into that scene. Are those coin tosses cumulative? Or when you toss that coin, is that it? Plot A wins, plot B loses.
If you succeed, that's it.
Wow.
And that contributes to having a fast-paced game. If you miss, then the next person gets a chance to flip their coin. If they miss, the third person from the first plot gets a chance to flip their coin. But if they fail, let's say A plot fails twice, then the game's over. B-plot is eventually successful.
So does that mean that I might not get the chance to answer my question, or?
That could be the case, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so those are basically all the rules. If you wanted to play it after listening to that, all you need is just the characters. And I just love how simple this is. And the good thing is, even though you, as Alun has just pointed out, you might not get to answer your question like clearly or get a coin, it still informs how you play your character. It will prompt you to create misunderstandings, escalating problems. It will lead to absurd situations. Yeah, so basically it's amazing if you're looking for a very, very simple short game. The text says it takes 40 to 70 minutes. In my experience, it was a bit longer, but I've played with a bunch of Germans and Austrians, so we had to look up some of the concepts. And, you know, if you're familiar with the rules, I think this can be done much quicker, but also it depends on whether you've got plot twists or not. Yeah, so I think you can actually, as a player, decide how fast you want to go, because I did witness some players who said, I've got a coin, but I don't feel ready to answer my question yet. And on the other hand, if you were playing with a time limit, you said we've got 90 minutes or less, then you could say, we're at the 70-minute mark. Now someone has to flip their coin. And the last thing I want to point out is there are two principles in the text that I really, really liked. And first one is don't try to be funny. And the other one is don't try to be clever. And I think that's really, really helpful advice when playing a funny game, because eventually the humor will come up naturally. And if you're thinking too much about it, you might get analysis paralysis, or if you play an NPC, you might outshine player characters, if you're trying to be too funny. And especially don't try to be clever. That's something I've heard on Pandas Talking Games. That's a podcast. And ever since it became one of my mantras when it comes to GMing. So I'm really glad to see it in a rules text.
It's interesting because years ago we played the Dying Earth RPG from Pelgrane, and it has this thing called taglines, which are phrases that are distributed out to the players, and you're supposed to, in the course of play, use them to make witticisms, like funny, one-liners, and it both asked you to be funny and to be clever. And I have never had players so hate a mechanic as they did with that. And like, I can understand you might have a table of people who all are in that mode, but wow, yeah, that's really interesting. Alun.
Yeah, I too have been scarred by comedy games. If I go back far enough, Tombs comes to mind. Hilarious in your head, at the table doesn't play. So the funniest games I've ever played have probably been sessions of Fiasco, which again is based on this idea of ill-conceived plans. Here it's a sitcom context. There it's, well, thriller is often the case, but so I think it is the unexpectedness of people around the table just, go, that's ludicrous.
Yeah.
And it becomes funny in the play. Yeah. So I think that's good advice.
Awesome. That sounds very cool. I literally hadn't heard of it, so I'm really glad for you to talk about that.
Well, I'm reminded we have a radio program here where people bring books and talk about the book, and people say, I'd never heard of this book, and now I've read it. It's fantastic. I did buy the PDF this morning.
Oh,
simply because the premise sounded so fun. I mean, I was going to ask you, Michael, you were playing with a bunch of friends on a retreat. Were they all game players already?
Yes, and I think that actually helps.
Okay.
Just the reason I ask is that capacity to bring creativity in the moment, to create a ludicrous situation, then to run with it, is something that if you haven't played many games, I would imagine that's a little bit more of a challenge. But
Yeah. I will probably pass this on to my sister who does a bunch of writers retreats and things and manages those because it does seem like the kind of thing that could be a good exercise for that kind of thing.
fantastic icebreaker for a bunch of strangers coming together.
Yes.
Absolutely. I think if you're familiar with TV tropes in terms of sitcoms, that helps a lot.
Mm.
If you are more experienced in terms of how to frame a scene, how to play NPCs, how to cut, I think that will definitely be beneficial. But I think you don't have to be like super experienced. If one person who facilitates the game, not just the people who might have never played a role-playing game into the right direction, I think that might work quite well as well.
Awesome. Alan, let's come to you to tell us about your recent gaming and a game you want to talk about.
Okay, so barring my home group, which I will talk about at the end, all my gaming so far this autumn has been part of the Open Hearth. And I'm going to go back to Shared Hearth, which is our seasonal, broadly, opportunity to bring people, give them an experience of the community and often give them experience of playing online. So there I ran one shots of Alien Dark and the cluster, the first time I'd run a one shot of that, and that went surprisingly well, given that there's quite a lot of setup. So it was pre-gen cluster and a curated range of playbooks. Then I've been playing in your Star Trek game, or the first half of a long season of Star Trek Adventures USS Kintsugi, where I've had a ball playing the Tellurite everyone loves to hate. Again, I am currently this evening I'll be 3 sessions into a series of Jotunweird. That is my PBTA game in search of perpetual completion. So as usual, I'm just tinkering. But the one I want to talk about is Grimwild, because I've been running that now for about 3 months with my home group. It must be said my home group is online because we are geographically separated. But, the pitch from the book, it says Grimwild is a game of cinematic fantasy adventures. You go on quests, delve into dungeons, and explore the wilderness. So that strikes me as cinematic D&D, or maybe cinematic Daggerheart, given Michael's point about that. Now, I think they won't mind me saying that prior to us getting together a couple of years before the pandemic, their taste in play was pretty trad. So, D&D, Call of Cthulhu, Traveller. Since I've joined the group, we've been playing an awful lot of Fate and an awful lot of PBTA of one kind or another. And that's been going well. But you will imagine their surprise when I pitched a game at them that said, and I think my post to them said, you could play a cleric, fighter, rogue, paladin, or druid. As I have proudly declared, I haven't played D&D since 1980. So they were slightly taken aback, I think. But Grimwild offered that because those are the playbooks, if you will, along with Bard, Berserker, Monk, Ranger, Sorcerer, Warlock, Wizard. All the benefits of D&D familiarity with none of the concomitant absurdities, as I would see them. It's a D6 dice pool mechanic, graded outcomes, success, mixed success, failure, bracketed by critical and disaster. It's got a core talent for each of the playbook, the classes, and then you get another talent for every level. And levels are based on 1 XP per session played. To get to second level, you need to play 2 sessions, third level, 3 after that, fourth level, 4 after that, and so on. So it's a steady progression. It's simple to administer. So all that is very much the feel of D&D, but in there is some forged in the dark mechanisms, D6 dice pools, but only with 4 characteristics, 4 attributes. Scored 1 to 3 dice, you get 8 dice to distribute at the start, depending on where you want to, how you want to play it. No one forces the fighter to put 3 into brawn, but it appears that most of them would. But I think the thing that's nice about it is that then there are resources for the player to spend to boost that dice pool. So a lovely mechanism at the start of every session, each of the players has to tell you something about their character from the previous session. And for that, they get a point of spark, which is a way to boost the dice pool. They always start with a story point, which allows them to influence the fiction, the narrative in play in a session. And they can push themselves by creating a short-term disadvantage to one of their attributes, again, in order to boost the impact of an action. Harm is simple. Mark an attribute for a low-stakes consequence. You roll with a disadvantage next time, then clear it. If it gets worse than that, high-stakes damage, you're either bloodied or rattled. Physical or emotional consequence. And if those are filled up, you are dropped, which is, out of the scene, in effect. So all very straightforward, but fits neatly with some of the tropes, I think, that people are used to. So I think you get what it says on the tin. I think it's cinematic D&D. But the thing that has really piqued my interest is that one of the problems I have with Forged in the Dark per se is that there's a relatively predictable benefit of success. There's a clock running, and if you succeed, you mark the clock. And so you know that you need X successes in order to, and then it's interesting to get there, but you're very clear about the outcome. What Grimwild does is not have clocks, but dice pools. So you might have an individual foe or challenge, like climbing a cliff or reading a code, that might be rated as 4 dice. So when the characters succeed at doing something that could overcome that obstacle, whether it's an NPC or a thing, they roll those 4 dice. And if it comes 1, 2, or 3, you erode one of those 4 dice. If you roll 4 dice and they all come up 1, 2, and 3, solved. Our last session on Monday, I'd created what I thought was a really potent, corrupted dryad. Paladin, 5 dice, rolls them all, 1, 2, 3, or a selection of that. Dryad is taken out in one swing because he has a move that allows him to push it. So combat was swift and surprising. And I think that's the thing I like about it, is that, you can use those dice pools, not just for opponents, but for physical barriers, for long-term effects. I've just been writing a set of these for a corrupt Order of Paladins. And, 4 dice, evidence of illicit materials, evidence of illicit influence. If you get those, you move on to the next stage, which is convince the populace that they're corrupt. And then you end up with the kind of big boss confrontation. So it's the uncertainty I love, because out of that uncertainty comes the level of tension, and that tension keeps interest at the table, and that interest at the table creates interesting stuff. So yeah, I've been very taken with it. And typical of me, I'm now thinking, where could I use this dice pool mechanic? But I refuse to graft it onto Jotunweird, because that would just be another mechanic that I would have to tweak. So yeah, that's it. And I think it's given all those feelings of D&D as I remember it, but plenty of scope for narrative and fiction first interventions by both the GM and the players. And it bowls along quite swiftly, which is, if I think of Michael's comment about long Daggerheart combats, you're not just eroding those hit points.
You mentioned in the show notes about those talents, and you say some things there. What do those talents actually look like for the characters?
Very much like you would find at the top of a Forged in the Dark. Let me just pull one up. Let's go with that paladin that I was talking about earlier. So that paladin has a first talent called Oathsworn. And what that means is that he defines 3 tenets, and there's a random or a way to help them shape the 3 tenets of their order. And in pursuit of those tenets, they gain what is called in the game 3 smite. And so that's why when he was faced by a 6 dice corrupted dryad, his roll for damage, if you like, rolled 5 d6s. They all came up 1, 2, or 3. Each 1, 2, or 3 erodes that 6 down, got down to 1 dice, but smite allows him to spend smite to get rid of the last dice. So it's really neat. And then there's a bit of variation on that about how he can gain more smite over time. So is it every 2 levels he'll gain another smite?
Wow.
So yeah, it's very much like that kind of an individual move that tones neatly with the head of the playbook. And then all the other ones are similar. Our fighter has taken a talent called measured tones. Faced with some disruptive goblins, he addressed them in measured tones and calmed them down.
That's great.
Cool, that sounds really interesting. I have to admit I have not played Grimwild before, but I scrolled through the text earlier, and there's one thing that caught my eye, so I'm curious if you could expand on story arcs.
Yes.
Because on the character sheets, there's like a group arc and character arc, and you also mentioned story points. So I wonder how narrative is this, how mechanical is this, and in general, what's it about?
I mean, it's principally an RP hook. So it's principally about giving, because there are relationships between the characters as well. Let me just see if I can pull up an example. Our druid has complex respect for our rogue. So in a circumstance where that changes, that earns them spark. The story arcs, our party arc is uncover the power of the sacred grove, proving themselves and gaining reputation. So that, if you like, is the driver for the campaign. Everything is focused on finding this sacred grove. But then our cleric's character arc is finish a quest you commit to. So my expectation is that when I put that cleric in a difficult position, they will push through. So yeah, they are largely RP hooks, I think it's fair to say, rather than having a direct. Story points are a bit like, I don't know if you're familiar with fate, but you spend a fate point to influence the scene. So I spend a story point, but you forgot that I had already spoken to this guard, and actually I bribed him.
Now, in setting up this episode, there was a question that was brought up. This is a game where, at least as of the recording, the designer is missing. It kind of became popular, and there's some real question about that out there. So I just thought I'd mention that before anybody jumps into the comments to say that. Is it grim? Is it wild? Like, what makes it Grimwild?
I think that the grim outcomes can be quite wild. The GM gets a resource called suspense, which they can spend to invoke the powers of a foe, who again are very simply described. 3 or 4 lines or phrases describe a typical opponent with a dice size of dice pool: 6 dice, 4 dice, 2 dice. But yeah, sorry, I should have said that actually. I mean, I should have kind of made the point that J.D. Maxwell is the author through Oddity Press, and he has gone quiet. There's an outline of a Wild West version of the game, which I was quite excited for.
Mm-hmm.
But and also one short campaign called Galen Vale and a dungeon called Nevermore, all of which we've played. And just to make the point about the utility of these dice pools, Galen Vale is based on the idea of a town where there's a mayoral election going on, or there's a conflict about who's going to control it. And as the players play through, their impact on the dice of different potential groupings plays out. And we ended up with quite a stirring speech on the steps of the town hall as a consequence.
I love that. That is absolutely my jam, is that kind of easy thing. I'll be interesting to see over this next period of time how much people adapted to other things. Certainly, I can imagine a lot of things like 40K or other kinds of things that could be easily adapted. I'm going to talk about my gaming. So a little bit less this time. I ran Mythomorphosis at Shared Hearth, and I played some things there, including Horst's OSR sci-fi game. And there was another game I played. Oh, Kemidano Opera that Fumi ran. That was amazing. So I don't know if I mentioned the last time I was on, but I just thought I'd throw that out there. In person, I've been running Mutants and Masterminds. There's a new edition of Mutants and Masterminds, the 4th edition, that they did a playtest version of. I actually ordered that in a hard copy. and we've switched over to it. I quite like it. I'll eventually talk about that. I've talked a little bit about the challenges of running superhero modern games in our present climate, and I don't think I've solved that problem yet. But online, I've run a lot of Star Trek Adventures, second edition, still continuing those games, really enjoying it. I love running 2 sessions as an episode and like having the break between them being that mid-episode commercial break and really leaning into that. I have been running Rapscallion primarily because Alun ran it and I quite liked it despite its messiness. And I've been running that, and I think we're a dozen sessions into that. I just started a playtest of my Girl by Moonlight Dark Academia playset that I've been working on, and we're just 2 sessions into that. But then the other thing is now, gosh, it must be 3 months. We've been playing Band of Blades. This is the Forged in the Dark game. Jim Crocker talked about it, has talked about it repeatedly, and it was something I've always wanted to play. So, Band of Blades is a Forged in the Dark game. It's inspired by Glenn Cook's The Black Company and a lot of the other sort of fantasy military fiction that's out there, like the Deed of Paxtonarian and others. But here it definitely follows Cook's model of there being large helpings of supernatural horror in this game. And I'll kind of come back to what that means in play. But this is interesting because it is one of the earliest big Forged in the Dark games, alongside Scum and Villainy, which is also from Evil Hat and also by the same authors. And I like Scum and Villainy, but Scum and Villainy is really a reskin of Blades in the Dark. And no shade on that. Like I think it does that very, very well. And really hews to the original Blades in the Dark system with a few tweaks to add some things in a different setting and things. Band of Blades, though, wow, it takes a big swing and it massively retools the play structure and system and mechanics of Forged in the Dark. So I really like Blades in the Dark. When it came out, I ran it with my home group for a while. And so I backed the Band of Blades Kickstarter. And when there was an early version of it during the Kickstarter, I tried it out and I enjoyed it, like in theory. But one of the things was it was the game, I think that I hit where I like the logistics of it, the logistics of play were just so overwhelming. At that time, I wasn't sure what it was going to look like. So basically, here is the pitch. There is a world, some of the gods have gotten killed. There's a big evil undead force. They've got some servants that used to be avatars. There's a big battle where your heroic forces have lost. They have absolutely lost. And now the story of our game is your unit falling back across the countryside, trying to get back to the main castle keep to set up a defense. And you are doing that as you're trying to balance questions of logistics and corruption and people dying and morale and all of that. And it is a long survival horror game. And there's a map. Like this is a very specifically set world. There is a map. There are a set of choice points and decision points that you have to make at several junctions that like, okay, are you going to head into the mountains because you can get this special like resource that hurts the undead? But if you do that, like you're giving up access to supplies or recruitment, and there's some special dangers there. Or are you going to head south to go towards a civilized area, which has its own set of problems with people kind of battling against you as you make your way back, but there's more supplies and stuff? Or are you in such bad shape that, as our group has done, you go into the woods to try and like find some cover there as you make your way back? There are 2 levels of play. There's the camp phase. And in the camp phase, this is the post mission stuff, which I don't necessarily want to go into, but everyone has a role there and a character for it. So there is the leader of the militia. They make the decisions about what missions are going to be done. They make the sort of high level decisions as a player who has that. They have their own playbook and mechanics and rules and things. There's another one who is the marshal, and they handle organizing the recruits and the smaller units of characters and secondary characters that are going to die. They are going to get killed off. And when you lose a recruit, you're impinging the morale. And there's a spy master, there's a lore master, and I'm running the quartermaster who has to deal with, do we have enough food? Do we have enough people? Do I have horses? Can I dispatch horses on this mission? If I don't dispatch horses on this mission, our engagement roll is harder. And it's wild. Like it is that there's that level of play. And then you also make up a specialist, and then there are like a bunch of recruits, sort of the unnamed recruits that will get named as you go along. And so everyone starts by making a specialist. So I made up a medic. And so I've got my medic person, and their special abilities, they can always go on particular missions. And like you don't have to play that character that you made up. And you may end up getting more specialists, like these recruits, if they survive long enough, may become a specialist and become a tank, or you may recruit special people. And then you may play different characters depending on these missions, because each sort of moment when you get there, you say, I would like to aim for this kind of mission. I would like to aim for a mission that resupplies us, or I would like to aim for a mission that gets us more magical resources, or it gets us a recon. And you might not get that because each area has only a certain kind of missions you can do, and it is randomly generated about what the mission actually looks like. And 3 missions are generated. And then the next session, after you've done the camp phase, you decide what missions you're going to do. And one of the missions, your primary mission, you send your PCs on. You do the engagement role, you go and play it out, and you do that. There are bonuses for succeeding, and there are consequences for failing. So, okay, you do that. Second mission, you actually send NPCs on. There's an engagement role. You see what happens, and people are going to die. Like on a 4 to 5 on the engagement role, if you know Forwards in the Dark, people are going to die. You're going to succeed, but it is at a severe cost. And even if you succeed, there's probably going to be some wounds that are being taken by the specialists. And again, you win, you get this, you lose, this happens to you. But then there's a third mission. There's always a third mission. You can't do that mission. You are going to take whatever penalty there. So it is a wild set of decisions and pressing on. There is a ton of logistics here, both in 2 different playbooks, the setup of the mission structure, the generation of the missions. It is a lot, and it was overwhelming to me when I looked at it before. And this game sings. This game sings because Jim Crocker is running it. Jim Crocker has run it or played it 3 times before this. I think he has run it complete through twice. So he knows how the mechanics work. He knows how the structure works. It is really interesting to see someone like it's not just that they're a good GM, it's that they know this game. They know what the tools are. They knew when they used Roll20 how that needed to be used, because sometimes when you play with a Roll20 with those character sheets and stuff, it can be overwhelming. Jim knows how to work those, and he was like, I'm going to set everybody as a GM so that everybody has access to do these things. And he knew exactly what he wanted to do. And I cannot stress enough how masterful he is in managing that. I mean, he's already a strong GM, but just his knowledge of these tools. And I would say, if you have the opportunity to play with Jim running this, you should absolutely take this. Even if this game isn't necessarily your jam, you should try it. Like, it is wild. And I am so glad that I have done this. And that masterfulness, that ability to keep us moving, not having to go, okay, let me look that up, let me go check this. He knows, and we keep humming along. He knows exactly what the structures are. Boom, 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 boom. Which is great because, oh my God, Forged in the Dark is harsh. It is a harsh game already. This is harsher. This is a really long, grim survival horror game. You have to really be on that page. Like I played in another game that Jim ran. He ran Last Fleet, and that game I actually stopped playing in because like I wasn't ready for that level, and there was a different crowd. It was a set of players who had very different expectations about sentimentality and cheap emotions and things like that. This is a game that is everybody's on the same page about what the tone is, but we have lost badly. This last session, we went on a mission and we absolutely got spanked. And like right into the first action of the mission, a desperate action, my character, the medic, fell into this spiked pit of corruption. And at that point, I had spent all of my medical tonics and I had one stress left and I like climbed out of there and I'm like, this is the first freaking turn. And it went downhill from there. And like there came a point at which I turned to Puckett, whose character was in charge, and I said, we need to leave. We need to go. And I was prepared if Puckett said, oh no, we need to stay and do this. I was prepared for that. But Puckett went, oh, he didn't want to. He really did not want to, but he did it. And we still lost 3 recruits, I think. We had 2 of the PCs get to just below fatal harm and like almost die. And it was wild. And the thing is, if you get wounded, if your characters get wounded, it is not like they heal up and come back the next time. They are out for sessions recovering because healing in Forge in the Dark is slow. And then you don't have them as a resource. And then you need them for the next mission. You have to send a specialist, this medic specialist on this next mission. Well, if the medic's out or they're wounded, it's wow.
So how dire is your situation on a meta level? Because you can actually fail this game.
Oh yeah, I
You
I
might
think
not reach the end point.
I think there is a distinct chance that we might fail. We have, I think now, 2 of our most important specialists have level 3 harm. That is not healed easily. And we're also at a low morale because we lost recruits. That reduces the number of campaign actions to heal us that you get. We only got 1, and I had to heal stress. Like I had to put people at liberty. I'm the quartermaster. I have to make that decision. And we just don't have those options. And I don't know. And we're out of supply. Like I have food, but I don't have supply to give us extra actions. And we're going through the woods. We are not going to get supply.
I sense a doom spiral.
It is a doom spiral, but I think that's kind of the point of the game in some ways. And I'm really interested to see how people are going to react when we do start. One of the things is it was interesting to see us go to that we're about to all get killed here moment in the session when suddenly everybody's like, let me look at my character sheet. Can I do this? What can I do? Like everybody is looking at everything that they can spend. And there is that slowdown where people are pulling on the brakes to try and get it. And Puckett was like, Puckett is bargaining. He's going through the stages of grief there as he's realizing that his character might about be killed. It was something like, and that is the vibe. And I love that it does that.
I've only played it once, and I think that the problem was it was early on after it came out. It was the first time I'd ever played something that had 2 playbooks or 2 levels of play. So I was thinking I had plates to spin. It was only 4 sessions, so there tended to be a focus, I think, on the missions. Whereas looking back on it, a mission, then a significant amount of the downtime phase to really think that through and play those characters rather because they became, I think, for us, mechanisms to get to the next mission.
Yeah.
So I think this is a game that, in my feeling, requires time.
100%.
And also, as I think you say, Jim is king of the long-term game. He's king of Night Witches as well, which is all about that devoting that span of time to something. Now, I have a bit of a blades block anyway, so I'm not going to run this, but I think I'd have to think twice about even playing it.
I think that's absolutely fair. I will say one thing that Jim does, and I think it is now my favorite structure. I use it for Girl by Moonlight. Is there is a session that we do all our downtime stuff in, and there's a session that we do the mission phases in. Absolutely split those off. Know that you're going to do that, even if it only takes you like, if it gets done in an hour and a half, that's fine. We break those up to make it easier for people to grasp that. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I think that's the right way to do it. I was a lore keeper. That's one of the roles in Band of Blades once, and I really enjoyed it, but our GM tried to fit in, all the phases into one session. And that didn't leave us much room to breathe and have replay scenes. And then I decided, okay, I like this game a lot. I'm gonna run it, and I felt quite supported by the game. I really appreciate the structure and the point crawl and everything. And there's a clear ending that's also really good. And I, just like you said, I decided to break the phases up because the secret sauce is free play. You have to allow for, developing character relations and fleshing out some of the NPCs, because then it will hurt even more when they die. And that, well, you have to be into that because it's quite bleak, but it pays off.
Yeah, just a point about the recruits, I think they're called in this game. This idea of secondary characters or subsidiary characters, or in its crudest form, tools to throw into the mix to take the hits before you take them. That's what was missing, I think, in my experience of this game, is that they became just chits to throw into the meat grinder.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas in, for instance, legacy games, you have that opportunity to have a reasonably fleshed out character from another faction. And to be honest, I think Star Trek Adventures takes that to the ultimate kind of level where they grow into real characters.
Yeah.
So the good thing is they're called rookies. They can also advance and then they're called something else. You get to play them because you don't have enough specialists to send on every primary mission, and they get to advance. You might be close to level up, and then they might die, and it's heartbreaking.
Yeah. The fact that the marshal has to name every recruit before anything happens to them, before you send them out, is really good. There are a couple of things I just want to mention in passing before we move on. Is this is a really interesting game in that you're like, ooh, you could do this with a bunch of other things like Battlestar Galactica or Planescape Blood Wars, like Weird War II. That all sounds interesting. However, once you actually go and look at Band of Blades, it is the most lore-baked game in a way that isn't just lore dump. Like every bit of lore, every bit of world building is functional and constructed into those mechanics. There is nothing quite like it. And I think from a design point, to build a game that is made to tell one story with, look, Night Witches is a little bit like this. This takes that to 11 because of the level of lore that is happening there. And there was a promise that there would be a sequel to this game, and I'm not surprised they didn't do it, just because how singular that original game is. So it's really, really striking.
Yeah, I mean, I now I've twigged why you asked me how grim is Grimwild, and it is nowhere near this grim.
I think that is absolutely fair. So before we actually get to the voices here in our second segment, I should probably mention we've had some recent releases on the Open Hearth podcast feed. We just had a new episode of A Different Kind of Hex, which you should check out. We had some special seminar episodes on the feed. We just put out our Paranoia episode of Roll for Mutation. And prior to that, we had a new episode of Roll for Origin. And so we've got a lot of things in the feed. And we've got coming up, those of you who are following our podcast, listen to us. We are not putting out an episode in December. We are regrouping because we're going to be gathering together everything for our Game of the Year episode that we put out at the very, very tail end of the year, beginning of the year, where we'll have all our community members participate, give us clips of their picks, and we put that all together. So January requires us to get all that together, spread it out to editors, and then bring it back. So we've got a lot of things in the can for next year. So we've managed to keep it weekly throughout this first full year of the podcast. And I'm very excited about what we have coming up. So now, for our second segment, we ask everyone to tell us about something they're really digging right now and why. Michael, what is giving you life?
So my local queer community is actually giving me life. And in particular, I'd like to shout out Queeres Zentrum Düsseldorf. For those who aren't familiar with me, I'm German, so I live in Düsseldorf, and this is an organization who organizes several events there. They do protests, board game nights, workshops. They meet up for brunch once a month. There's even a lesbian wrestling contest. So there's something for everyone. And I really love that these events are safe spaces for all kinds of queer folk. There's also a big age range, which I really appreciate. You've got people in their 20s and people in their 70s. So you get to talk to folks who might be out of your usual circle. Yeah, so basically, I enjoy going to these events, meeting new people. I've even made some friends there. And a couple of months ago, I sneaked in a role-playing game into the board game night. I facilitated Viva la QueerBar,
Oh, awesome.
which it's always so much fun to run. And the people I played with weren't familiar with role-playing games, and they had a blast. So yeah, I don't have like any concrete plans yet, but I'm hoping to run some more for them next year.
Excellent. And we'll put a link to Viva la Queer Bar in the show notes, so because it's a great game. Alan, may I ask you, my fine Welsh friend, what is giving you life?
Well, not Welsh rugby. That's a very in joke for those of you listening from the Principality and feeling as depressed as I am. So that is definitely not giving me life at the moment. Beating Japan by 1 point is not what we expect. Anyway, I'm going to say this community gives me life, because otherwise this sounds very self-congratulatory, because this community keeps me thinking about games. And I've been through a particularly productive period this last season. The cluster, a supplement for Against the Dark Conspiracy, is hopefully going to be up by Christmas. I'm having a go at bringing, I think, probably my first game, Project Dark Prometheus, up to snuff with recent developments. And a lot of that is to do with this community and its willingness to listen to people like me cogitating on whether they should get rid of this or add that to a game in our Discord, being so prepared to try out games that change from session to session sometimes, and also runs those seminar sessions that we've been recording recently that you've been organizing, Lowell. Those have been really interesting. I'm really looking forward to the next one on adapting modules, because I think that there's this huge source of stuff out there in the world, but it's not really designed for fiction first games where you play to find out. So how do you put these things together? That's going to be really interesting. So yeah, this community gives me life because it keeps me engaged, keeps me thinking, keeps me excited, keeps me passionate about playing games and running them.
So I feel a little guilty given how high-minded both of your things were. And I'm going to mention something that is entirely stupid and worse because I think I also mentioned it in a recent seminar episode. So I play a dumb gotcha video game called Honkai Star Rail. I play it on the PlayStation. It's a mobile game, but you can play it there. It is a turn-based sci-fi anime waifu husbando simulator with really cool stories and visuals. And This year's story has not been as compelling as previous years, but they're trying. And this last update 2 weeks ago, they added this new mode called Currency Wars, which is because there's this economic group in the setting. But what it does is you normally got a team of 4. In this particular mode, you kind of have to go through and randomly put together your team to do this run with these fights. But then you also can have up to 6 people in the back row. And the numbers go up like flashing on screen of damage numbers and special effects going on and happening and combination of different powers and how they synchronize. It absolutely fuels my lizard brain. Like, I love it. It is tremendously stupid, but it's fun. It's fun getting to play with all the toys in the toy box. Like, I've got a deep bench of characters that I've spent tickets on, and being able to see them pulled out and played has been just wonderful. I burned through it over the last 2 weeks. I think I probably put 30 or 40 hours just into this new mode. And it's delightful enough to watch that Sherry stops whatever she's doing just to watch like us go through it and talk strategy and make picks and things. So really, really, really good. But again, I feel guilty for mentioning that. Guests, let me ask you before we close out, where can you be found? Where should they follow up on you, social media or interest on? Michael?
So if you want to follow me, I'm K-pop and RPGs on itch.io and on social media. But if you want to get in touch and talk about games or K-pop, best place is probably the Discord, and you'll find me as Michael D or K-pop and RPGs.
Excellent. And Alan?
Yeah, you can find me on some Discord servers, usually as Alun R or Gallus Games. You can find what I grandly described my games under my imprint, Gallus Games, Gallus. Because I'm Welsh, some people think it's Gallus. No, Gallus Games. And you can find me on BlueSky, typically as, it's never easy, it's gallusgamesar.bsky.social.
We'll have all of that in the show notes as links. So if you're listening to this, hey, the Open Hearth podcast is a production of the Open Hearth Gaming Community. It is an online TTRPG play community that anyone can join. As I mentioned at the top of the show, we have a dedicated calendar app where folks can sign up for our sessions, and you can join our Discord. I have a link to that. You can check out openhearthgaming.com for more details and information. Hey, if you've enjoyed the show, please consider supporting our Patreon at patreon.com/openhearthgaming.com. We are on BlueSky, Tumblr, and Mastodon at Dice Camp. Check that out. As a reminder, hey, we won't be having any more episodes coming in December, but that's because we're preparing for our massive episode from all of our community members at the beginning of the year. So again, please consider rating, subscribing, and reviewing our show. It does help us get attention. Alan, Michael, thank you so much for coming on. And listeners, that is our show.